Facts First presents. 20 years after a doctor vanishes, mushroom pickers make a strange discovery. Before we get into this video, help us spread the word about Facts First by clicking that like button. Also be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss our future videos. Carlos Sanchez Ortiz de Salazar had a bright future ahead of him. He was a licensed physician in Spain, and he had a degree in psychology. He also spoke multiple languages. He had the reputation of being a gifted doctor, polite, studious, and responsible. What people didn't know was that Carlos was secretly suffering from acute depression. One day in 1996, Carlos disappeared. He didn't show up for work and his family and friends hadn't heard from him. His family and friends refused to give up on him, and for 14 years they continued their search. Finally, with no leads and no information, the authorities finally announced that they were going to label Carlos as presumed dead. Even though the authorities decided that Carlos was dead, his family still refused to give up. 5 years after the authorities declared Carlos dead, there was a lead in the case. It was discovered in the lush wilderness of Italy's Maremma region. In November 2015, a group of hikers was out in the woods just outside Tuscany. They were searching for edible mushrooms, and they heard that in this area edible mushrooms grew in great abundance. So they weren't having much luck finding mushrooms that day, so they decided to head out into the forest to see what they could find. They never expected to find a campsite. 20 years after this doctor vanished, these mushroom pickers made a strange discovery. When the hikers went into the forest, they saw garbage. Now, at first they thought that the trash was left behind by irresponsible campers. They followed the trail of trash and it led them to a campsite. They saw a tent, tin cans hanging from the trees to catch rainwater, and the campers' belongings. While the hikers were looking around the campsite, they were shocked to see a man emerge from the tent. He had a dirty face and a very long beard. They didn't know if the man was dangerous, so the hikers returned to the trail to head home. When they got to the beginning of the trail, the hikers decided that they'd better say something to somebody, so they found a forest ranger and told him what they saw out in the forest. When the forest ranger went out to the campsite, he saw the man for himself, and after questioning him, he found out the man's name was Carlos. He was Spanish. He added that he'd been living there since 1997. The forest ranger wasn't sure if this was the doctor who had disappeared all those years ago or not. The man assured him that he was who he said he was, and he even offered ID. He had several pieces of identification that said he was, in fact, Carlos Sanchez Ortiz de Salazar. Carlos wasn't all that happy he was discovered, though. He told the forest ranger that he didn't need to worry about him remaining in the forest. He said that since he'd been found, he'd be getting out of there as quickly as possible. Before the ranger left, he took photos of the man's identification. He was going to pass it along to the authorities. With this new information, the authorities tracked down Carlos's family. They wanted to share the good news that he was still alive. As soon as his family was contacted, they got on a plane to Italy. Carlos's mother, Amelia, said that it was as if her son was born again. She understood, though, that just because she found her son, it didn't mean he would be willing to be part of their lives again. Amelia said that just one hug from her son, that would be more than enough. Local law enforcement gathered a search party and went out to where the mushroom pickers had first encountered Carlos. Unfortunately, he had already packed up and left. His camp had been abandoned entirely. They found a pile of trash, his tent, and other survival tools, but there was no sign of Carlos. Marcelo Stella, the mayor of Scarlino, says that they'll keep an eye out for Carlos, but they won't start an active search. The man left on his own, and he doesn't want to be found. They couldn't waste valuable resources on somebody who chose to stay in hiding. His family hopes, though, that one day they will lay eyes on Carlos again, even for just a minute. His family says they don't want to hold him back or try to talk him into going home. They just wanted to see him again, to give him a hug. Subscribe for more.